what we can become or how we can view the world when we don't seek approval. That consensus is mistaken for truth and people stop asking questions. To be reflective, to ask questions, to seek information. It's about reflection and introspection, about getting to know the stranger that I am to myself. If I don't question the mask, if I don't question the conditioning, when I was talking about the knowledge, I'm talking about the conditioning. What sociologists call the socialization process. We become domesticated animals. If I don't question that, I'll never be truly free. I'll never be truly myself. And I'll always seek for other people's approval. Issues that can cause problems within relationships. This is a group discussion within the group Understanding Insecurity. There are 4 categories. We're looking at relationship category number 2, relationship with other. The topic is need for approval. Otherwise put, it could be said to be over-dependence on external validation. I'd like to begin this session with a question, followed with a challenge. So I'll pose the question first and then give some time for those who wish to respond. Okay, so here's the question. How well do you believe you know yourself?
I'm just sitting thinking about it. Maybe 50-50. Because sometimes I still surprise myself.
I don't know.
Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. The reason I ask this question is that in my personal observation, looking back over the last 30 plus years, in order to open myself up to greater self-awareness, I had to learn to view myself as someone I didn't know at all. I had to view myself as a stranger, as if I was a stranger. I've come to know this as another phase of introspection or self-investigation, not self-inquiry. I mean self-investigation as opposed to self-inquiry. They may sound like the same thing, but I'll let you anybody who wants to look that up for themselves. Okay, so here's the challenge. The challenge is in the form of a rhetorical question, something to think about if you wish. No need to respond to this question. So afterwards, I'll leave a little room and then I'll move on to the subject for this session. So here's the challenge. Can you pause the inner drive to improve, fix or defend and simply investigate the foundation of the self you believe in? And each of us can do what we want with that challenge. That's the beauty of it. So here's the introduction to the relationship category, relationship with other. Problems that arise in relationship with other do so when the sense of self meets the projected idea of other, whether in intimate partnerships, family, friends, colleagues, or society at large. So again, tonight's topic is need for approval. The alternative title, over-dependence on external validation. Tonight I want to concentrate on the behavioural symptoms, what it looks like, and the error or distortion in thinking, the erroneous thoughts behind that belief, the need for approval. So I'll do what it looks like first, or behavioural symptoms as I've started calling it. Seeking approval before making choices. It's like when I go to somebody and say, do you think that's a good idea? Changing behaviour to avoid disapproval. Like where I would maybe make jokes, I might not make a joke for fear of disapproval. Becoming anxious in the absence of constant reassurance. With the insecurity that I had, I was constantly asking for reassurance in relationships. Seeking compliments is another symptom. That was nice of you to give me that compliment. Can you say some more? Right. Over-explaining oneself, tailoring one's behaviour to get praise. Sort of the same as changing behaviour to avoid disapproval. And fearing criticism. I remember when I was younger, every bit of criticism, every comment that sounded objectionable, I took it as a criticism. And I took direct criticism fully on board and hated anybody that did that to me, right? Thinking it was them that did it to me.
And that was the starting point, maybe.
Perhaps,
Oh.
indeed, yes. And it only grew from there. And it was seen through all that made me start this group.
My case too. Yeah.
Mm.
On shaming, repeating that I must behave in a certain way. If I not behave in a certain way, I'm not good, and on and on. From the parents' standpoint of view, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago, and it has only accumulated through time.
Yeah, I probably started feeling insecure in the family home as a child. And that extended with me in what you might call romantic relationships into my teens and 20s and early 30s as well, early to mid 30s as well. And if I'm honest, probably beyond that, but not quite as so bad, at least up until 2012 when it all just fell away. But that's another story. Okay, so here's a question that looks outward before we go inward. And it's not to be judgmental necessarily, you know, we can judge if we like, but I'm not going to try and tell anybody how to behave. But just something to think about, perhaps. Here's the question. What does it say about society that approval can be used as a form of manipulation? See, it's more difficult to admit to needing approval at any given time. You know, I've felt a need for approval in the past, but I don't feel that way anymore. That may be true or untrue, right? But and that's for me to see when I am needing approval, if I ever do. Like perhaps if I go into work, certainly when it comes to the head chef, I want to have a good relationship with him, so I tend to behave in a way that's not always fully me. So, you know, so there's that sort of idea. So it's easier to admit to needing approval. Sorry, it's more difficult to admit to needing approval, but it's often easier to see how we ourselves can use it as leverage sometimes when we know that someone.
Yeah, manipulating with people.
Yeah, so we catch it if we're able to see that, we might catch ourselves manipulating others and how that expectation becomes the expectation that is made through programming or conditioning is a much better word. You know, when we see that, in a way, it's a two-way street like that. So if I don't see that society or people within society, and it could be employers, friends, neighbours, family, how they use that to manipulate us and how we manipulate by requiring someone else to come up to a certain standard so that we can approve of them.
Is it interesting? Sorry, Xander, you finished?
Go ahead.
I'm just sitting thinking through different scenarios in my head, and it's me that's done the conditioning on me. I had a good supportive family. We came from a poor background. My dad was the black sheep of the family, so we came from a very poor background. And when we moved house, the catchment area for the school that I was going to was in the street. Is it the street we were in? And that part of the area was sent to what used to be a private school for girls only. And just the year before I was due to go to secondary school, it changed to a comprehensive school. So
Right.
some people from the poor area got to go to the posh school. But when I went to the posh school, it was me that told me that I didn't fit in, that I wasn't good enough, that my clothes were too poor, that I didn't have the same level of education that they seemed to have. You know, going from the school they came from up into the secondary school. What we had as an education in primary school was less than what they had. So I measured myself against that, but nobody made me feel like that except me. And when I came back home, the school was quite a distance away. And when I came back home, the people that I went to primary school with bullied me because who does she think she is, going to the posh school and having new friends? So I didn't fit in with them. And then when I went to my new friends in the posh school, I fit in with them and got on great. But their wider circle of friends, I felt inferior. And I've just realised I still do that. Even that story that I just told you just before Demir came on about the woman in the workshop that I went to make that, the wee mandala design on my screensaver there. And she was, middle class woman. And I felt inferior, but I didn't let her dominate the conversation or tell me what to do, but there was still that tension there that I felt that instantly. So it's still there. It's still there, but it's me that's done it. Nobody else made me feel like that.
I would point you not to family conditioning, but
Uh-huh.
the wider the community that you grew up in, and ask where did that belief come from? If it didn't come from the family, because conditioning is almost layered. First the
Yeah.
family, then the school, then the wider community. Well, the
It
immediate.
came from my observations of my dad, because he was the black sheep of the family and the rest of the family were quite well off. So it came from observations.
Right. And there's only one person can see that, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So it's interesting, as you say, for sure. I've always thought of myself as a uneducated council estate dweller, brash and, not very diplomatic and quite rough or on the edges kind of thing. In some ways, I feel comfortable and I actually don't feel comfortable in that with them people anymore, the people that I grew up with.
Yeah.
I do feel comfortable when I go home with the people that I would, or even in Belfast with people around where I live. There's a council housing estate nearby, and I lived there for a number of years, so I know quite a few people, and I get on okay with them. But I wouldn't spend all my time there. I spend more time with people who, I don't know, think more like me now. It's no a judgment. It's just they're no either for me or they're no. Anyway, what I wanted to say next. It can be helpful to reflect on times when decisions you make are influenced by how you imagine someone else will react. Seeking approval often masquerades as kindness, politeness, or being a good person, but might actually be fear-driven.
It is fear driven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Underneath all of it is the fear, like with many other identities and beliefs I have about myself. All identities, all made up in a bundle, like a Russian babushka. Yeah.
yeah. That's why I started with that question. How well do you believe you know yourself?
Of beliefs.
So here's a simple reflection. I mean, when I say a simple reflection, I mean the answer is quite obvious. When do you feel most like yourself? When alone, or when you're trying to manage the impression others have of you? For me, the answer is obvious. I always feel
In my case alone, always.
Yeah.
Then I'm closest to my core, let's say. The core, I would say core identity or identities, because I have them. They are like a nano blanket wrap around me, and the sense of lack, every time the sense of lack appears, I go seemingly outside of me, and I'm completely ingrained in that belief, whatever it is, that I cannot take this anymore, that I'm depressed, that I'm not feeling good, and so on. Yeah.
Might come back to this later, because there may be times when it's to our advantage to try to manage the impression others have of us. But we'll turn that around later. For now, is there anybody wants to say about that section? That's looking outward. I haven't got anything for the inward part yet, because that comes later. Okay, so moving on with some emotional results of feeling a need for approval. It will include, obviously, insecurity. It goes without saying almost, which is why we've included it here, really. Chronic dissatisfaction. You know, I was never satisfied with any amount of reassurance that I got. Even where I didn't ask for it outright. In other words, if I was in a relationship with some girl or something and I felt I needed reassurance, I wasn't long in letting her know that I needed reassurance, and was somewhere or another. And it wasn't always wholesome. Then there's dependence on external feedback, which again has by now become obvious, and a low trust in one's internal knowing. Okay, I want to add here that if a relationship is sustained by reassurance and approval, it's not a relationship with the other, as in this category. It's a relationship with one's insecurity. The chase for approval doesn't bring people closer, it creates a performance that is difficult to maintain and keeps people apart. In other words, insecurity in this sense destroys relationships. That is the crux. My experience, that's what I learned. That insecurity in a relationship isn't a relationship with the other person. It's a relationship with one's own security, and that person isn't having a relationship with you. They're having a relationship with your insecurity. When you're insecure in a relationship, there is no you. There is no them. It just becomes a total game of need, a need and reassurance. So the physical results, nervous energy. You ever look at somebody and you just know they're nervous? You think, oh, I see you, kind of thing. And you just know that this person's nervous, and so you kind of treat them a wee bit differently. Sort of with kid gloves sometimes, perhaps. Okay, that nervous energy. Another physical result is adrenaline surges. And then there's social anxiety symptoms like a dry mouth or shaky hands. There's only two examples I could come up with there. Anybody want to say anything? Go.
Walking on eggshells.
Yes. Yeah.
Expecting that something will happen,
Yeah.
and that you cannot go through anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a sense of inner constriction, like solar plexus, anxiety,
Yes.
presence of heightened anxiety. Yeah. Like a fight or flight.
Yeah. The best word I had to describe it is a feeling of angst. Quite an old word, no used very, very often, but synonymous with anxiety.
Yeah. Anxiety is so blunt word that doesn't mean anything.
Hmm.
There are so many aspects of that when you speak, when you say anxiety.
Yeah. So here's a question. There may be some obvious differences between being liked and being genuinely seen. In what ways do we confuse the two?
Being genuinely seen doesn't always mean you're going to be liked.
It might actually mean the opposite, right?
Yeah.
So here's my response to that question. I had to think about this for quite a while. Being liked is tied to approval. That happens when you meet someone's expectations, reflect their values, or play the role they want you to play. I remember a recent experience with that at work, nonetheless, where I felt that I was being, as somebody said, they wanted to clip my wings. It's fragile, dependent on performance, and when I say it, I mean being liked. It's fragile, dependent on performance, and can exist without anyone knowing much about you. Being seen is entirely different. It happens when someone catches sight of you beneath the surface, your contradictions, your edges, even the parts you might rather hide. To be seen can feel uncomfortable because there's no mask in place. A lot of masks tend to drop around close family, for example. To be seen can feel uncomfortable because there's no mask in place, but it carries a weight of truth that being liked never does. You know, when people see you that way, they accept you that way, they really see you, they know you. The two get confused because being noticed or praised is easily mistaken for being understood. A smile of validation or a flood of approval can feel like recognition, but it's not. What we often chase are signs of being liked, quick reassurances that we belong, when what most people are really hungry for is the deeper experience of being recognised. The difficult part is that being truly seen might cost us being liked. When the mask falls away, some people step back. But if someone sees you clearly and still chooses to stay, that carries a depth no amount of liking can ever match.
I suppose being seen as well. It depends on how you think of yourself. When you allow somebody to see you, what do you think of yourself? When you take, would you take the mask off if you didn't think of yourself as, something that anybody would want to see?
I think sometimes we adjust our behaviour without even realising it, depending on what people were around and what the setting is. And so what you're saying is it's totally valid, I think. Because if I see myself as something greater, then compare that behaviour with if I see myself as something less than the people in the room, for example. Then I'm going to modify my behaviour accordingly. And they'll either see the modified behaviour without seeing what it's been modified from, or if they know me better, they'll know that that's no him. You know, he's acting out a character. Okay, we might have already hit some clues as to the errors or distortions in thinking, but let's discuss that next. The distortion or error in thinking is believing another person's perception is more accurate or valuable than one's own internal compass. I think you should start that group, or I think you might want to hold off from starting that group. If that becomes more valuable than my own feeling, then obviously my thinking is distorted. I don't need their approval. I can make my own mistakes. Thank you very much. Right. I've made plenty in the past. I'm quite sure I'll make some more. And am I okay with that? Or do I need that person's perception? Okay, another one is believing that others' opinions create your value. Some of this is reminiscent of some of the stuff that we've discussed in previous sessions. Believing others' opinions create your value. The last distortion or error in thinking is mistaking attention for love or affection. So if we confront the faulty assumptions, right, we can do it in different ways, right? We can look at the paradox. External validation feels like truth in the moment, but is actually unstable, like trying to build a house on moving sand. And in philosophy somewhere, there's a philosopher that talks about reliance on others' valuation as a form of slave morality, whereby we outsource our sense of worth instead of creating it. And then there's a logical contradiction. If everyone's seeking validation from everyone else, then whose opinion is actually reliable? So I said earlier that we would turn it around. So here's a question to turn it around. If approval were truly meaningless, if it were truly meaningless, like this discussion might look like it's trying to imply, if approval were truly meaningless, why does its absence feel like a wound rather than nothing at all? In other words, is it always not valid?
Would that depend on what meaning we've given to it?
Given to the absence?
To approval or the absence thereof. There's something that we've made up that it means.
I see what you're saying. So thereby feeling like a wound rather than if there is approval, do I take it on board? If there isn't, does it mean something about me?
It depends on what meanings we're attaching to all of that.
Yeah. So here's a wee question that can take us a little further. What secret dependence is exposed when a single word of praise can lift and a single word of dismissal can crush? So addressing what you brought up, Linda, quite appropriately, actually. What secret dependence is exposed when a single word of praise can lift your mood and a single word of dismissal can crush it?
It's like you've got your self-worth from something outside of you. That you're dependent on other people showing you your self-worth rather than feeling it yourself.
Yeah. And did anybody notice that I didn't ask this time whether anybody had ever felt this way? My reason being that the other content that was in it was pointing us in that direction, I think, for want of a better way of putting it. Because again, when we see how others seek our approval, then it becomes easier to see how we seek others' approval. At least that's what I found.
Yeah. Everything what I have in myself, I can notice seemingly, yeah. Having in myself, I can notice in other, like a mirror. Or it can be all opposite of that, yeah. If I can notice something, that what I'm noticing can be noticeable in certain situations with people. And it's a game people play, knowingly or unknowingly. And someone can not play, not wanting to play that game, yeah, anymore. There are those kinds of people, yeah? Watching how other people react, how they behave, not in a forceful manner, just observing, yeah? Cool, calm, collected, yeah? Observing the games people play.
I had to ask myself when I was putting this together, how many times have I modified my behaviour when I did something or said something I noticed or heard a hint of judgment, disapproval, or something like that from another person, and I instantly changed my behaviour. How many times did I do that? Have I done that? Because I'm sure just knowing it isn't enough to make me not do it, or for me to have the ability to not do it every time from here on in. I'll do it again. Possibly. I've got another bit of writing here, and then I've got another question, and again, my written response. So here's this other wee bit of writing that I put in. Seeking approval is never as simple as asking for another's opinion. Beneath it lies a quiet self-rejection. Each time someone else's perception is granted authority, meaning accepted, it's like a silent declaration that says, my own seeing is not enough. What begins as reassurance soon becomes a barter system of worth. Behaviour turns into currency. Perform, conform, please, and in return receive the coin of recognition, so to speak. But this trade is rigged because the coin is counterfeit. Approval only soothes for a moment before it fades, and the hunger demands another dose. It's like I'm describing an addiction, isn't it? Dependence on external validation places life under the tyranny of the crowd, the voice of society, of family, of the other person. Dictates not only what is acceptable, but even who one is allowed to be. In this way, a person abandons their own compass for a map drawn by someone else's hand, even if that someone else is society at large. This closing paragraph says, at its core, the chase for approval is a betrayal of truth. It shapes a second-hand life, stitched together from others' expectations rather than excuse me, rather than an original presence. Every time approval is sought, self-trust erodes, and the dependence grows. It's a quiet surrender of freedom in exchange for limited relief. Here's the last question, and I've also got a very short response to this question myself. Again, I'll ask the question and allow for responses. Anybody want to say anything about that last part, that last piece of writing?
No, I think there's just a lot of things to let settle. I've enjoyed this session. It's been a good session. I'm going to have to go, Xander. So thanks for the discussion tonight, guys. That was really good.
I've got one more question. Do you want to hear it before you go, Linda?
I've got 1 minute.
Right. So the question is, what is the difference between truth and consensus? And what happens when consensus is mistaken for truth?
The immediate thing that popped into my head was a diversion on your path. But I'm going to have to go, guys. So thank you so much. That was a really good discussion.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks for being here.
Bye, Linda.
Catch you next time.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
I'll ask that question again. What is the difference between truth and consensus? And what happens when consensus is mistaken for truth?
Damage.
Yeah.
I see that on and on with groups, with in every possible avenue. if it's economical, cultural, it's a part of human behavior. Many things, when scratch on surface, don't hold water at all, and they are repeated over and over and over as a truth, as a way of living, that we should live like that. Yeah. And there can be a backlash if you are not in the group, yeah, that you have a different opinion. There's not much liberty in that sense that you can say. It automatically gives a backlash and many other things. Yeah, it can differ in emotional charge some people had as a response when you start to talk about certain things. Very high emotional response. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, there's certainly some examples within history of what happens when consensus is mistaken for truth. You know, one in particular springs to mind, maybe two. One's own imagination is always more reliable. But I've seen it happen many times, I think. So, in some ways, the question itself is actually quite a good question. It fits with what we were just talking about opening the group up. That wasn't intentional, by the way. So my response to the question is, truth is what stands whether or not anyone agrees with it. Consensus is simply agreement, a majority perception. The two rarely overlap. When consensus is mistaken for truth, people stop asking questions. The comfort of the crowd becomes a substitute for clarity. In that confusion, lies and untruths gain legitimacy, and those who doubt them are treated as if they are the problem. I would add to that not everything that looks like a problem is a problem. Sometimes it's a solution. That's where I finished in my note taking. And when I finished there, I thought that was quite an abrupt ending, but it actually sort of rounds off this discussion quite nicely. Any thoughts, anybody? Okay, so if everybody's ready, we can call it a night at that.
Okay.
Okay, so it started as a discussion about the need for approval, and it ended with a discussion about what we can become or how we can view the world when we don't seek approval. That consensus is mistaken for truth and people stop asking questions. This again points to the need for introspection, which obviously is the page, to be reflective, to ask questions, to seek information. And it's not about the truthers and the conspiracy theorists. It's about reflection and introspection, about getting to know the stranger that I am to myself. If I don't question the mask, if I don't question the conditioning, and I started the page series on confronting the mind by talking about the knowledge. And when I was talking about the knowledge, I'm talking about the conditioning. What sociologists call the socialization process. We become domesticated animals. And if somebody wants to view me as the problem because I do that, because I see through that knowledge, that conditioning, whatever you want to call it, that map that has been created by someone other than me,
then the problem is theirs, not mine.
But if I don't question that, I'll never be truly free. I'll never be truly myself. And I'll always seek for other people's approval. So with that, I'm going to end the recording. People are welcome to stay on after and chat.
I don't have your mail
I'll
address.
send it to you. I'll just stop the recording first.